The words were a ghost from a life he had buried under 7 years of concrete and steel. My mommy worked for you before she died. Marcus Thorne, known in a previous existence only as Ghost, did not flinch. He couldn't afford to. At 42 years old, his body was a fortress, built by discipline and decorated by a past that refused to fade. He sat in the hushed, amber-lit dining room of Ethel, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign, only a single, unmarked bronze door. Before him was a plate of seared scallops that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. He hadn't touched it. The stillness he cultivated was a weapon, a shield, and a prison. But the small voice, spoken barely above a whisper beside his custom Brioni jacket, had just shattered it all. He turned his head slowly, a deliberate movement that made the heavy 24-karat, 12mm Franco chain around his neck gleam under the recessed lighting. His eyes, dark and accustomed to measuring threats in fractions of a second, fell upon a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, with wide, terrified eyes and a pale face smudged with dirt. She was clutching the sleeve of his jacket, a small, desperate anchor in a sea of polished mahogany and quiet wealth. His gaze took in every detail. The worn-out sneakers, the cheap, thin coat inadequate for the city's biting November chill. The way she trembled, not from cold, but from a terror so profound it seemed to vibrate in the air around her. His instincts, honed over 15 years of navigating the brutal mathematics of the drug trade as the undisputed king of the Thorne Syndicate, screamed at him. This was not a child asking for money. This was a soldier, cornered and out of options, making a final, desperate gambit. The elaborate calligraphy tattooed up his neck, a stylized crown with the words "Kingdom Come" wrapping around his throat, seemed to tighten. The ink on his knuckles, spelling "paid" on his right hand and "full" on his left, felt cold against his skin. He saw the other patrons begin to notice, their quiet conversations faltering. They saw a monster and a child, a mountain of tailored muscle, gold, and ink, being accosted by a street urchin. They saw a problem. Marcus saw a prayer. "He's in the car," the little girl whispered, her eyes darting towards the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows. "He said he's taking me and my brother away. He hurt the man who was watching us." Marcus's focus narrowed, blotting out the entire world until only the girl remained. He leaned in, his voice a low rumble, a controlled avalanche. "Who is your mommy?" "Elena," the girl breathed, a tear finally escaping and tracing a clean path through the grime on her cheek. "Her name was Elena Flores. She was a nurse. She had a picture of you. She said you owed her." Elena Flores. The name hit him like a physical blow, a key turning a lock in a part of his soul he'd bricked over. It wasn't 7 years ago. It was 12. A botched deal? An ambush? He'd been left for dead in a warehouse, bleeding out from 3 gunshot wounds, his so-called soldiers either dead or scattered. He remembered the smell of antiseptic and the determined, fierce face of a woman who refused to let him die. Elena, a medic who worked in a clinic his syndicate unofficially funded. She hadn't been one of his people. She was a civilian, a healer caught in his orbit who, for reasons he never understood, spent 10 hours stitching him up on a dirty floor, saving his life when everyone else had written him off. He'd tried to pay her. He'd sent a briefcase with $250,000 in cash. It was sent back with a simple, handwritten note. Life is not a debt that can be paid with money. He had never seen her again. He heard she'd moved away, wanting to escape the city and the violence he represented. He had respected that. He had owed her his life, and she had wanted nothing but to be free of him. Now, her daughter stood before him, claiming that debt. He reached out, his hand covered in intricate ink work, impossibly gentle as he placed it on her small shoulder. The patrons in the restaurant were now openly staring, a manager moving tentatively in their direction. Marcus ignored them all. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer than he'd heard it in years. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily," he repeated, "the name of vow. Your mother was right. I do owe her, and I keep my promises." He looked past her, through the window. A black sedan was idling 50 yards down the street, its engine puffing a white smoke into the cold air. He could see the silhouette of a man in the driver's seat, another in the back. "You did the bravest thing I have ever seen, Lily. You came for help." He gave her a small, reassuring squeeze. "Now, help is here." The manager finally arrived, his face a mask of polite panic. "Sir, is there a problem? Perhaps I should call security?" Marcus looked up, and the full force of his presence, the weight of the man they called Ghost, fell upon the nervous manager. It was not a look of anger. It was a look of absolute, chilling finality. "You will do nothing," Marcus said, his voice quiet but carrying the authority of a king. "You will bring me the check, and you will tell my driver to bring the car to the front. Not my Rolls, the other one." The manager, who knew Marcus only as the wealthy real estate developer Mr. Thorne, saw something in his eyes that made him forget all about protocol. He saw the ghost. He simply nodded and fled. Marcus turned back to Lily. "Where's your brother?" "In the car," she sobbed. "He's only 6. He's scared. The man, the one who grabbed us, he told us our parents sold us. He said we have a new family now." The words "sold us" ignited a cold fire in Marcus's chest. A specific, familiar rage he hadn't felt since the day he'd stood over the small, white casket of his own daughter, lost to the same senseless violence he had once perpetuated. That day, he had walked away from his empire, from the 15 years he'd spent building a kingdom of dirt and blood. He'd spent the next 7 years building legitimate empires of glass and steel, trying to wash the stains from his soul. But he knew, deep down, the monster was only sleeping. Lily had just woken it up. He pulled out his phone, a sleek, encrypted device that only a handful of people had the number for. He pressed a single button. It was answered on the first ring. "Rook," Marcus said, his tone flat. "Boss," came the immediate gravelly reply. Rook, his former lieutenant, now the head of his legitimate multi-million-dollar security firm, a man whose loyalty was forged in fire and absolute. "I'm at Ethel. There is a black sedan, a Lincoln, down the block. License plate George Frank Victor 559. There are 2 men inside and a 6-year-old boy. Their names are Lily and Leo. The girl is with me. They are the children of Elena Flores." There was a moment of silence on the other end, a silence of pure comprehension. Rook remembered Elena. Everyone from the old days did. She was the woman who had saved the king. "They took them, boss." Rook's voice was now lethally cold. "They bought them," Marcus corrected, the words tasting like acid. "They are part of a larger problem. I need you to find out what that problem is. I need the network active, all of it." "Consider it done. What's the play on the car?" Marcus looked at the sedan. The man in the back had turned, looking impatiently toward the restaurant. "They're getting nervous. My car will be out front in 2 minutes. A black Mercedes Maybach, armored. You know the one. I'm going to walk out with Lily. They will follow. I want you to be the one who stops them. No sirens, no police, not yet. This is a conversation, not an arrest." "Understood," Rook said. I'm 5 minutes out. I'll make it 3. The call ended. Marcus stood, a towering figure of bespoke fabric and brutal history. He took Lily's small hand in his tattooed fingers, which had signed death warrants and counted millions, gently enveloped hers. "Don't be scared of what happens next," he told her, his voice a low promise. "When I make a promise, God himself couldn't break it. You and your brother are safe now." Lily looked up at him, at the fearsome tattoos crawling up his neck, at the cold gold on his chest. But she didn't see a monster. She saw the man from her mother's picture. The one her mother said was dangerous, yes, but who understood the nature of a debt. She nodded, her small hand tightening its grip on his. For the first time since she'd been taken, she felt a flicker of hope. She had chosen the scariest man in the room because her gut told her he was the only one powerful enough to save her. Subscribe now, because what happens next proves that true strength isn't about the evil you've done, but the good you choose to do with the power you've earned. Comment where you're watching from. This story will remind you that sometimes the most fearsome dragons make the best guardians. The bronze door of Ethel swung open, and Marcus Thorne stepped into the biting wind, the little girl a small shadow at his side. The idling black Lincoln down the street immediately shifted, its brake lights flickering off. As predicted, it began to crawl forward, keeping pace. Marcus didn't look at it. He guided Lily toward the gleaming obsidian block of his Maybach, which had just pulled silently to the curb. His driver, a former Special Forces operator handpicked by Rook, stood rigidly by the open rear door. "Get in the car with him, Lily," Marcus said softly. "Lock the doors. He will not let anyone near you." Lily hesitated, her eyes wide with fear as she looked at the following car. "What about you?" "I have to have a conversation," Marcus said, his gaze finally flicking to the Lincoln, which had now stopped 20 feet behind his Maybach. The passenger door opened. A large, sloppy man in a cheap suit got out, his face a mask of greasy confidence and irritation. "Stay here," the man barked, pointing a thick finger at the driver, before starting towards Marcus. Marcus gave Lily's hand one last, gentle squeeze. "Go now." She scrambled into the sanctuary of the Maybach. The heavy, armored door closed with a solid, reassuring thud. The man was 10 feet away now, his cheap cologne fouling the air. "Problem here, pal?" The man sneered, trying to peer past Marcus at the car. "That little brat cause you some trouble? She's coming with me. Private family matter." Marcus stood perfectly still, letting the man's words hang in the air. He met the man's belligerent gaze with an unnerving calm. "She's not going anywhere with you." The man laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Look, I don't know who you think you are, Mr. Fancy Suit, but you're getting in the middle of something that's not your business. Give me the girl before you get hurt." He made a move to push past Marcus. Marcus's hand shot out, not grabbing the man, but simply resting flat against his chest. It was not a violent motion, but it stopped the man as effectively as a brick wall. The man's eyes widened, first in surprise, then in anger. "The hell you think you're doing?" he snarled, trying to shove the hand away, but it was like pushing against granite. "I'm giving you a choice," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, a tone that his old associates knew meant that something terrible was imminent. "You can get back in your car, you can give me the boy, and you can tell me everything you know. Where you got them, who you work for, who else is involved. Or you can choose the other path. I wouldn't." The man stared, incredulous. "You threatening me? Do you have any idea who I work for?" "No," Marcus said simply, but you are about to find out who I am." Just then, a black SUV, a heavily modified Cadillac Escalade, rounded the corner and screeched to a halt, boxing in the Lincoln. The driver's door of the SUV flew open, and Rook emerged. He was a slab of a man, dressed in tactical black, his face a roadmap of old scars. He moved with the fluid, dangerous grace of a predator. The man in the driver's seat of the Lincoln saw Rook, and his eyes went wide with panic. He fumbled for something on the seat beside him. Rook was faster. In 3 long strides, he was at the driver's side, the door was ripped open, and the man was hauled out onto the pavement with brutal efficiency. The greasy man in front of Marcus was frozen, his bravado evaporating like mist. He looked from the scene behind him to the calm, imposing figure before him. Fear, true and deep, began to dawn in his eyes. "You don't know who I am," Marcus repeated softly. "Let me educate you. 15 years, I ran every ounce of product that moved north of the river. My organization had over 200 soldiers. My personal net worth, the illegal part, was estimated at 9 figures. The people who tried to cross me didn't just disappear. Their entire bloodlines were erased from the city records. They called me Ghost, not because I was invisible, but because if you saw me and you weren't supposed to, you were already dead." He paused, letting the name sink in. He saw the recognition flicker, then explode into sheer terror in the man's eyes. The name was a legend, a bedtime story criminals told their kids to scare them straight. A figure from the past, supposedly retired or dead. "Ghost," the man stammered, his face turning ashen. You're supposed to be out. You're legit." "I was," Marcus said, his hand still firm on the man's chest. "You and the people you work for have brought me back. Now, for the last time, tell me where the boy is." The man, trembling, just pointed a shaky finger at the back of his own car. Rook was already there. He opened the rear door and gently lifted out a small, terrified boy who looked like a younger version of Lily. The boy, Leo, saw his sister's face in the window of the Maybach, and a fresh wave of tears streamed down his face. Rook spoke to him in a low, soothing voice, then carried him over and handed him to Marcus's driver, who secured him inside the car with his sister. Marcus turned his full attention back to the man. That was the easy part. Now, the conversation. You said you bought them. From who? Where are the others? The man was practically weeping now. I don't know. I'm just a driver, a transporter. I get a text, an address, I make the pickup. I take them to a drop point. That's it? I swear. The drop point. Where is it? Marcus's voice was like ice. A warehouse. Pier 4, on the west side, the man blubbered. They're getting a shipment ready tonight. A dozen kids, maybe more. They're shipping them out overseas. Please, man, that's all I know. Ask about me. I'm nobody. I'm just a driver. Marcus looked into the man's terrified eyes and saw the truth. He was a cog, a pathetic, disposable piece of a much larger, more disgusting machine. He removed his hand, and the man nearly collapsed in relief. Rook, Marcus called without turning. Rook appeared at his side. He had already subdued the other driver, who was now zip-tied and sitting on the curb, head in his hands. Take them, Marcus ordered. Take them somewhere quiet. I want the name of every single person involved, from the top down. I want to know who is providing the children, who is arranging the transport, and who is buying them. I want to dismantle this entire network from the roots up. Use the old methods. Rook nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. The old methods. It's been a while, boss. He and another man who had emerged from the Escalade hauled the two traffickers to their feet and shoved them into the back of the SUV. Your protection means nothing to me, Marcus said to the greasy man as he was being dragged away. The people you work for, I'm coming for them next. The SUV sped off into the night. Marcus stood for a moment in the sudden silence, the cold wind whipping at his suit. He had just declared war. A war he had tried to leave behind, but one that had found him through the plea of a dead woman's child. He walked to the Maybach and got in the back. Lily and Leo were huddled together on the plush leather seat, their arms wrapped around each other. They looked at him, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and awe. It's over, Marcus said to them, his voice softening again. The bad men are gone. No one's going to hurt you anymore. Lily just stared at him. You came? You actually came? I keep my promises, he said simply. He looked at them, two small, innocent lives caught in the gears of a monstrous world. And in their faces, he saw the face of his own daughter, a ghost he could never save. But he could save these two, and all the others. If this story is proving that the deepest debts are not of money but of life, hit that like button right now and share it with someone who needs to see it. Now back to the story. The destination wasn't one of Marcus's gleaming penthouses or sterile corporate offices. It was a place far more secure, a fortified safe house, a relic from his old life, nestled discreetly in a quiet, historic neighborhood. It looked like any other brownstone from the outside, but behind the 19th century facade was a fortress of reinforced steel, ballistic glass, and a state-of-the-art surveillance system monitored by Rook's top men. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and calm. A fire crackled in a large stone fireplace. A woman named Sophia, a former pediatric nurse who was now on Marcus's permanent staff, had taken charge of the children. They were given warm baths, clean clothes, and a hot meal of macaroni and cheese that they devoured like they hadn't eaten in days. For the first time, Marcus saw the faintest hint of a smile on Leo's face. Marcus sat in a leather armchair by the fire, watching them. He wasn't on his phone orchestrating the coming storm. Rook had his orders. The machine was in motion. For now, his entire focus was on the two small lives in his care. He was waiting for the information from Rook, the blueprint of the enemy he was about to annihilate. But in this quiet moment, the past was a roaring tide. He remembered Elena Flores, her calm competence in the face of his own mortality. She had lectured him as she dug a 9mm slug from his shoulder. You build an empire on pain, Mr. Thorne, and it will eventually demand your own. He'd been arrogant then, a king on his throne. He'd dismissed it. Years later, her words had become his reality when he'd buried his daughter, Amelia. Amelia had been 8, the same age as Lily. She had her mother's smile and his stubbornness. She was the one soft spot in his granite world. A rival, a pathetic upstart trying to make a name for himself, had targeted his car. Marcus wasn't in it. His wife and Amelia were. The war that followed was biblical. Marcus had dismantled the rival's organization with a fury that scared even his own men. He'd personally dealt with the man responsible. But the victory was hollow. He had won the war and lost the world. That was 7 years ago. The day he had retired. The day Ghost died. A chime from his encrypted phone broke the silence. A text from Rook. It was a single address. Pier 4, Warehouse 7B. And a number, 12. 12 more children. The transport was a cargo ship, the Odessa Star, scheduled to depart at 4 a.m. It was now 11:17 p.m. Marcus stood up. Sophia looked at him, her expression knowing. Will you be back tonight? I will, he said. He walked over to the couch where Lily and Leo were now half asleep, watching a cartoon on a large screen. He knelt in front of Lily. "I have to go away for a little while," he said softly. "There are other children who need help. Sophia will stay with you. You're safe here." Lily's eyes were heavy with sleep, but she looked at him with an unnerving clarity. "You're going to get them, aren't you? The rest of the bad men?" "Yes." "My mommy said you were scary," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. "She said you had a monster inside you. But she said you only let it out to protect people." Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. Elena had seen him more clearly than anyone. He hadn't been protecting anyone then. He'd been protecting an empire. Now it was different. "Get some sleep, Lily," he said. "When you wake up, the world will be a safer place. I promise." He left the warmth of the safe house and stepped back into the cold night. The Maybach was gone, replaced by the black Escalade. Rook was in the driver's seat, his face grim. Marcus got in the passenger side. The interior was a mobile command center, glowing with tactical displays and communications equipment. "They talked?" Rook said, his voice flat. He didn't need to elaborate on the methods used. "The operation is run by a man named Alaric Petrov, an Eastern European player trying to carve out a niche in the human trafficking market. He thinks this city's old guard is gone. He thinks the throne is empty." "He's mistaken," Marcus said, his eyes on the road ahead. "What's the layout at the pier?" "Petrov's got about 20 men in the warehouse. Lightly armed, mostly pistols and a few shotguns. They're overconfident. The kids are being held in a container, ready to be loaded. Petrov is overseeing it himself. He likes to be hands-on." "And the authorities?" "I have a contact in the Port Authority. He's been paid to look the other way. The ship's captain is on Petrov's payroll. This is a self-contained operation," Rook explained, "which means no one outside this building knows it's happening." "Good," Marcus said. "No witnesses." They drove in silence for a few minutes. Rook finally spoke, his voice hesitant. "Boss, are you sure about this? Going in yourself? It's been 7 years. My team can handle this. You don't have to put yourself on the line." Marcus turned to look at his most loyal friend. "Rook, Elena Flores saved my life. I owe her this. And those children in that warehouse. They're all Amelia. I have to do this. But we do it my way. Controlled. Precise. This isn't a massacre. It's a message. We extract the children. We acquire Petrov. The rest are neutralized. But we leave them for the police." Rook nodded, understanding. This wasn't the old Ghost, the one who would have leveled the entire pier to make a point. This was something new. Something more focused. More dangerous. They arrived at a staging point a half-mile from the pier. 4 more black SUVs, identical to theirs, were waiting in the shadows of an overpass. A dozen men, the core of Rook's elite security team, all former Special Forces operators, were assembled, checking their gear. They were silent, professional, and absolutely lethal. Marcus got out of the car. The men immediately snapped to attention, their eyes on him. They knew him as Mr. Thorne, the man who signed their exorbitant paychecks. But they also knew the legends. They saw the way Rook deferred to him. They knew who he really was. "Tonight, you are not security guards," Marcus said, his voice carrying easily in the quiet dark. "Tonight, you are saviors. There are 12 children in that warehouse. Our only priority is getting them out safely. The opposition is to be neutralized with non-lethal force where possible. I want them alive for the authorities. All except one. Petrov. He belongs to me. Is that clear?" A chorus of "Yes, sir," answered him. "Rook will lead the entry team. You will secure the perimeter and neutralize the guards. I will handle the container. We move in 5. Marcus wasn't wearing tactical gear. He was still in his Brioni suit. He simply removed his jacket, folding it neatly and placing it in the Escalade. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing arms covered in a dense tapestry of ink. He was a stark contrast to the gear-laden operators around him, a titan in tailored trousers and a silk shirt. He didn't need body armor. His reputation was his shield. His purpose was his weapon. If this story proves that the past can be redeemed by the actions of the present, hit subscribe and share it with everyone you know. Because Lily didn't run to the police, she ran to the scariest-looking man in the room. And that man is about to move heaven and earth to save her. The approach was silent. Rook's team moved like wraiths through the labyrinth of stacked shipping containers, the salty air thick with the smell of rust and diesel. They disabled the 2 sentries at the gate with suppressed tasers before they could even utter a sound. The perimeter was secure in under 90 seconds. Warehouse 7B was a vast, cavernous metal box, poorly lit by a few dangling fluorescent bulbs. Inside, the scene was exactly as the intel had described. A group of men were gathered around a large blue shipping container, using forklifts to position it for loading. A tall, imperious-looking man with silver hair and an expensive overcoat stood watching them, smoking a cigarette. Alaric Petrov. Rook and his 10-man team took up positions at the various entry points, waiting for the signal. Marcus walked alone, straight toward the main roll-up door, which was open just enough for a person to walk through. He didn't sneak. He walked with a calm, deliberate pace, his hard-soled shoes echoing slightly in the cavernous space. His entrance did not go unnoticed. One of Petrov's men, a brute with a shaved head, saw him and immediately straightened up, his hand going to the pistol tucked in his waistband. "Hey, this is a restricted area. Who the hell are you?" he shouted. The work stopped. Every head turned towards Marcus. Petrov, annoyed by the interruption, turned slowly, an arrogant scowl on his face. He saw Marcus, a single, well-dressed man standing in the doorway. He looked him up and down, taking in the expensive shirt, the gold chain, the tattoos. He laughed, a plume of smoke escaping his lips. "Lost, Mr. Armani," Petrov said in a thick Eastern European accent. "Or did your yacht dock at the wrong pier? This is a private party. Leave." Marcus continued walking forward, his eyes locked on Petrov. He stopped about 20 feet away. "You have something that belongs to me, Mr. Petrov." Petrov's amusement grew. "Do I? I have many things. You will have to be more specific." "The children," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. Petrov's smile vanished. His eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you are talking about. Now, you have 3 seconds to leave before my men make you leave." 2 of his men started to advance on Marcus, pulling their weapons. "I wouldn't," Marcus said. The words were not a plea. They were a command. The 2 men hesitated, something in his tone giving them pause. At that moment, the lights in the warehouse flickered and died, plunging the entire space into near total darkness, broken only by the dim emergency lights. Before Petrov's men could react to the sudden blackout, Rook's team moved. Night vision optics flipped down. The sound of tasers and suppressed pistol fire, firing non-lethal rounds, filled the air. Men cried out and collapsed. It was over in less than 30 seconds. A symphony of controlled, professional violence. When the main lights flickered back on, all 20 of Petrov's men were on the ground, either unconscious or writhing in pain. being secured by Rook's operators. Only Petrov remained standing, his cigarette having fallen from his lips, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. He looked around at his incapacitated force, then back at Marcus, who hadn't moved an inch. Rook now stood at Marcus's side. "What is this? Who are you? The police?" Petrov demanded, his hand inching inside his overcoat. "Worse," Rook growled. He looked at Marcus. "Boss?" Marcus nodded. Rook stepped forward. 7 years ago, this city had a king. You are standing on what used to be his land. You are breathing his air. And you are stealing in his kingdom. You have made a grave miscalculation, Mr. Petrov. You thought the throne was empty." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "You are in the presence of Ghost." Petrov froze. The color drained from his face. Like the driver before him, he knew the name. It was a boogeyman, a myth from the city's violent past. The architect of the Thorn Syndicate. A man said to have retired, but whose name was still spoken in whispers. He stared at Marcus, at the ink on his neck, the cold fire in his eyes. And he finally understood. He hadn't stumbled into a police raid. He had stumbled into a graveyard, and he was the one being buried. His hand darted inside his coat. He was fast. But Marcus was faster. He crossed the 20 feet between them in a blur of motion. Before Petrov could even clear his weapon, Marcus had his wrist in a grip of steel. There was a sharp, sickening crack as the bone snapped. Petrov screamed, dropping the pistol. Marcus spun him around, slamming him against the side of the blue shipping container. "You build your empire on the tears of children." Marcus hissed, his face inches from Petrov's, the calm finally breaking to reveal the white-hot fury beneath. "My empire was built on greed and violence, but even I had lines. You and I are not the same." He slammed Petrov against the container again, the metal booming with the impact. "Where is the key?" Petrov, cradling his broken wrist and sobbing in pain and terror, just nodded frantically toward his fallen overcoat. Rook retrieved a set of keys. He found the one for the container lock and twisted it. With a heavy groan, he and another operator began to pull the massive doors open. Marcus held Petrov by the throat, forcing him to watch. The doors swung wide, revealing the dark, cramped interior. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a small face peeked out. Then another, and another. 12 children, ranging in age from 5 to 10, were huddled together in the back, their eyes wide and terrified. They were pale and thin, but they were alive. The sight of them, so small and so broken, doused the fire in Marcus's rage, replacing it with a deep, gut-wrenching ache. He looked from their faces to Petrov's. He released his grip, and Petrov slumped to the ground, a pathetic, whimpering wreck. "Get them out," Marcus ordered, his voice thick with emotion. "Get them blankets. Call the medics we have on standby." Rook's team moved with gentle efficiency, coaxing the children out of the dark container, wrapping them in warm blankets, speaking to them in soft, reassuring tones. One of the operators, a hardened former Delta Force soldier, had tears streaming down his face as he lifted a small girl into his arms. Marcus watched it all, a silent, imposing statue. He had taken down a monster. He had saved 12 innocent lives, 13 including Leo. He had honored his debt to Elena Flores. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a beginning. The world was full of men like Petrov, and he had the power, the resources, and now the motivation to hunt every single one of them. He turned to Rook. "Call Detective Miller. Tell him the trash is ready for pickup. Anonymous tip. Tell him there are 13 children who need a home and a network of traffickers who need a cage. Rook nodded. And Petrov? Marcus looked down at the broken man on the floor. He's part of the trash. As his team tended to the children, Marcus walked away, back into the shadows of the port. He pulled out his phone and looked at the picture he still kept, the only one he had. His daughter, Amelia, age 7, grinning at the camera on her birthday. He had failed to protect her. He could not fail these children. He could not fail Lily. The reunion happened not in a cold police station, but in the warm, fire-lit living room of the safe house. After Detective Miller and his task force had processed the scene at the warehouse, finding a dozen traumatized children and 21 neatly zip-tied traffickers, including a high-value target like Petrov, gift-wrapped for them. They had questions. But Miller, a veteran who knew Ghost's reputation and understood the city's delicate balance of power, saw the result and chose not to question the methods too deeply. The children were safe. That's what mattered. Under Marcus's discreet but immense financial influence, the children were not scattered into the overburdened foster care system. They were taken to a private medical facility for evaluation and care, with counselors on standby. But Lily and Leo remained at the safe house. They were the catalyst, the spark. They were his responsibility. When their paternal grandparents were finally located, an elderly couple from a quiet suburb who had been told their son and his family had died in a car accident, the meeting was arranged at the brownstone. The old couple arrived, their faces etched with a grief that was suddenly, miraculously, at war with hope. When Lily and Leo saw their grandparents, the facade of bravery they had maintained finally crumbled. They ran, their small legs pumping, and collided with their grandmother, all three of them collapsing into a tangle of sobs and desperate hugs. The grandfather stood by, his face wet with tears, his hand on his grandson's head as if to assure himself he was real. Marcus watched from the far side of the room. Standing by the fireplace, a silent, unmovable sentinel. He felt like an intruder on this sacred, private moment. This was the part he had never gotten. This was the reunion that had been stolen from him. The ache in his chest was a physical thing, a phantom limb of grief. Lily, her face buried in her grandmother's coat, looked up. Her eyes found Marcus across the room. She wiggled free and, to everyone's surprise, ran to him. She didn't hug him. She just stood before him and took his large, tattooed hand. "You kept your promise," she said, her voice small but clear. The grandfather approached, his eyes full of a gratitude so profound it left him speechless. He looked at Marcus. The imposing size, the gold, the ink that spoke of a violent life. He saw the man the world would judge as a monster. But his grandchildren were alive because of him. "Sir," the old man began, his voice cracking. "The police, they said an anonymous tip. But my granddaughter, she said it was you. She said her mother knew you." He shook his head, overwhelmed. How can we ever thank you?" Marcus looked down at Lily's small hand in his. "Don't thank me," he said, his voice rough. "Thank her. She saved herself. She was brave enough to ask for help." He then looked at the grandfather. "I just did what anyone should have done. Your family has been through enough. I have made arrangements. A trust has been established for the children's education. Your home, your finances. You will want for nothing. All I ask is that you let them be children. Let them heal." The grandfather could only nod, tears streaming freely. That night, after the children had gone home with their family, Marcus sat alone in the silent safe house. The events of the last 24 hours had irrevocably altered the trajectory of his quiet, ordered retirement. Rescuing Lily and Leo and the others wasn't an end. It was a proof of concept. He had the skills, the network, and the capital to do what law enforcement, bound by rules and bureaucracy, often could not. He could move through the shadows, hunt the monsters, and drag them into the light. He made another call to his lawyers, not the ones who handled his real estate portfolio, but the old ones. The ones who knew how to make mountains of questionable cash become legitimate instruments of power. "I'm establishing a foundation," he said, his voice resolute. "It will be called the Lily's Promise Foundation. Its sole purpose will be the location, rescue, and rehabilitation of exploited and trafficked children. I'm seeding it with an initial endowment of $50 million. I want it operational in 30 days. He was no longer just Marcus Thorne, the retired kingpin. He was no longer just Mr. Thorne, the sterile developer. He was Ghost again, but reborn. Not a specter of death, but a guardian. He would turn the tools of his old trade, intel gathering, surveillance, intimidation, and when necessary, controlled violence, towards a new, righteous purpose. He would build a new kind of empire. If this story reminded you that anyone, no matter their past, can become a force for good, subscribe, share, and comment below. Because somewhere right now, a child is looking for someone strong enough to help. 2 years later, the offices of the Lily's Promise Foundation did not look like the headquarters of a vigilante child rescue operation. They were bright, modern, and filled with the quiet hum of determined work. On one wall was a large world map, dotted with pins. Each pin represented a successful rescue. There were 472 of them, 472 children pulled from the darkness. Marcus Thorne sat not in the lavish chairman's office, but in a small, comfortable waiting area, looking at a framed drawing on the wall. It was a child's drawing, done in crayon, depicting a giant, scary-looking man, with tattoos holding the hands of a dozen smaller figures, shielding them from a group of dark, shadowy monsters. It was signed, Lily, age 8. The door opened, and Lily walked in. She was 10 now, on the cusp of adolescence. The haunted, terrified look was gone from her eyes, replaced by the bright, easy confidence of a child who knows she is safe and loved. Her brother Leo was trailing behind her, carrying a soccer ball. "Ghost," she said, her nickname for him now, a term of endearment. She ran and gave him a fierce hug. He returned it, his large arms wrapping around her gently. "I told you not to call me that in public," he rumbled. But there was no heat in his words. A small smile touched his lips. "Nobody here cares," she said, pulling back. "They all know who you are. You're the boss." She gestured around the busy office. "Grandma said to tell you thank you again for the tutor. Leo is finally passing math." Leo gave a shy wave. "Hi, Mr. Ghost." Marcus's relationship with Lily and her family had become a quiet constant in his life. He was their benefactor, their protector, their strange, intimidating, but fiercely loyal family friend. He attended Leo's soccer games, sitting in the stands by himself, a mountain in a bespoke coat among suburban parents. He received school report cards and crayon drawings. He was, in a way he had never thought possible, part of a family again. "I have a board meeting," he told Lily, "but I wanted to see you first. How was the trip to Disneyland?" "Awesome," she beamed, but Leo threw up on the teacups. They talked for a few more minutes, the easy, comfortable chatter of two people who shared an unbreakable bond. She told him about school, about a friend's birthday party, about wanting a puppy. He listened to every word, his focus absolute. This was the sound of a childhood reclaimed. This was the sound of his success. Rook appeared in the doorway of the conference room. "Boss, they're ready for you." Marcus stood up. "I have to go, lily pad." She stood on her tiptoes and gave him another quick hug. "Go save more kids, Ghost." He watched her and Leo run off towards the small play area the Foundation kept for visiting children. He then turned and walked into the conference room. The board was assembled. Rook, his top lawyers, a former FBI special agent he'd hired to run operations, and a world-renowned child psychologist. On the screen was the details of their next case. A ring operating in Southeast Asia, preying on refugee children. He took his seat at the head of the table. The conversation was no longer about profit margins or market share. It was about logistics, extraction plans, and aftercare protocols. It was the business of saving lives. Later that night, Marcus stood on the balcony of his penthouse, the city lights sprawling beneath him like a carpet of fallen stars. In his hand, he held his phone, displaying the picture of Amelia. He swiped, and the next picture appeared. It was a recent one, taken a few weeks ago. It was him, Lily, and Leo, standing by the water. Lily was laughing, and even he had the ghost of a smile on his face. He had spent 15 years building a kingdom of dirt, a monument to greed. He had lost everything that mattered. Then a little girl, the daughter of a woman to whom he owed his life, had walked out of the darkness and reminded him of that debt. She had given him a new purpose. He wasn't paying back a debt to Elena anymore. He was building a legacy she would have been proud of, a legacy for Amelia. His old life was a part of him, an engine of darkness he had learned to harness for the light. He didn't hide from it, he used it. The monster was still there, but now it had a leash, and its name was purpose. I was a king who ruled over nothing. Now I am a guardian who protects everything. They called me Ghost because I brought endings. Now I am Ghost because I create beginnings, and I keep my promises.